So as I record some of this video, I will be in India. I'm in India right now. And so if you hear any weird noises in the background, like birds and dogs and construction and people talking, that's what that is. The windows are really hard to close here, and I don't want to close them because it's so hot. So please pardon the noise in some of these segments. But that's how you'll be able to tell when I'm in India and when I'm not. So let's get started on this video. This video is all about the coloring and the Artemis Fowl related questions that you guys sent in. I had a lot of fun answering these questions. I had a lot of fun coloring this picture, so let's just get into it. A new thing I've started doing while I've been coloring is keeping the entire character selected. That's the reason why at the beginning of coloring Holly, I colored the whole thing one solid color so that I could easily make that whole character selection by right-clicking on that solid color frame and select all pixels. So then I don't have to worry about going outside her outer lines. I still have to worry about the inner lines, but it just gets rid of a hassle for me. So it's made coloring a lot easier. First, Milomazai, I don't know, asks, when did you read Artemis Fowl for the first time, and what did you think of it at the time? I actually listened to the first 4 books on audiobook. Audiobooks are made or broken by their narrator, and Jerry O'Brien is perhaps the best narrator I have ever heard. He can do so many accents so well, and his female voices aren't insulting. The books came out when I was like around 8, but I avoided them because someone made the mistake of telling me that they were like the Harry Potter books. Side tangent, I wasn't allowed to read or watch anything pertaining to magic as a kid. My parents are Christian, as am I, and I was their first kid of 6 kids. And my mom, when I was young, was paranoid that any exposure to magic would make me like a witch or something. This didn't help in my case because I loved fairies and mermaids. So even though my mom didn't want me to be involved with magical things, that's like all I drew. But I didn't mind when Mom told me not to read the Harry Potter books because I'm not into wizards. So I wasn't really interested in reading them anyway. But when my classmates found out that I couldn't read these super popular books, I was bullied for it. And I was already bullied as it was. So that kind of soured me on the Harry Potter book series. So I actually didn't even read them until I was 25. Which was like last year, I guess. So when a classmate told me that Artemis Fowl was like Harry Potter, I avoided them because I associated Harry Potter with bullying. So then years later, I was a freshman in high school, and my family had moved to a big city. So I had no friends, and I was going through this really detrimental romance book phase, where I would read nothing but romance, and it was really unhealthy for me because I would compare myself to the female protagonists, and I would just think that I was so ugly compared to them, and it was really not a good situation. But then I came across this shiny audiobook cover at the library. It was Artemis Fowl. And I remembered what my classmates said about it, but then I was like, maybe I should actually read the back of the book like a normal human being. And I was surprised to see that it was like right up my alley. After reading the books, I related to Artemis like on a deep personal level. At the time, I thought I was the smartest person in the room. I had a hard time making friends, and I thought it was cool to show as little emotion as possible. But I also loved how the series took my favorite thing, fairies, and revamped them in such an interesting way. And I loved the variety of characters, and I loved Holly. It was just perfect for me at that time. So the series was also really healing for me too, because it got me out of that romantic book funk. And so when I started reading the series, the 5th book had just come out. And so I had that great cliff to hang on to until the time paradox came out. And then I started reading them as they came out after that. And I started making fan art right away, and I haven't stopped since. Keith Me Baby One More Time, love your username, asks, who is your favorite Artemis Fowl character and why? I have the predictable favorite. It's the man himself, Artemis Fowl II. I have a type, rich, dark-haired genius, emotionally vulnerable, and it all started with this baby. Owen Colfer does such a great job of developing his character and making him empathetic even when he's being a jerk. It's a real testament to the series, though, when the main character is the popular favorite. He's the star for a reason. If you're curious about what my other favorites in this type are, Loki, of course. Sheldon from My Life as a Teenage Robot. He's not rich, but he's flippin' adorable. Batman from the Justice League animated series. And Jim Hawkins from Treasure Planet. He also is not rich, but he is bae. The Lover's Mask asks, what is your Artemis Fowl book rating from worst to best? This is so hard. Because the books kind of fall apart plot-wise after Opal Deception, but some of the later books are just so dang entertaining. And Artemis's development as a character is just so interesting all the time. So this is just my opinion, and I know that a couple of these are unpopular, but from worst to best, I'll say Lost Colony is my least favorite. I'm not a big fan of the demon parts. First off, I think it's really misleading to call them demons. Like, the word demon is just so rooted in, like, Judeo-Christian, like, popular culture. So that's really weird. And plus, they seem more like gargoyles to me. Like, they kind of have the Castoni, like, appearance. And gargoyle, I feel, is a word that would fit more in with, like, the Celtic fae kind of pantheon that they have. Pantheon's probably the wrong word. But anyway. So, I didn't like they were called demons. I didn't really like their culture. It felt kind of surface level to me. I liked some of the things they did with it. Like, I liked Leon Abbott's whole thing. I liked the volcano with, like, the moon gravity pulling stuff. That was all really interesting, but the rest of it was just not my thing. So my next least favorite is Last Guardian. That book was so confused. But it was still, the ending was amazing. I love the ending. Then Arctic Incident. I know this one is a big favorite. I don't know what it is about it that it's just not as gripping to me as the other ones are. Don't know what it is. And then Atlantis Complex. And then Time Paradox. And then Eternity Code. Artemis Fowl. And then Opal Deception is my number one. Because of, like, Holly having to get Artemis back. Like, I feel like their friendship really took a turn toward the better. I loved Artemis just all the way through that book. I love him, like, dressing as a teenager. I love how he's, like, so accepting of Holly. And I love how he defeats Opal. He's just the best. So, Opal Deception is my favorite. Major Ocelot asks, what are some of your favorite moments of the series and least favorite moments? I have a lot of favorite scenes. So I kind of grouped them together. My favorites are whenever Artemis shows how smart he is. So some examples are, like, the the climaxes of Opal Deception and Eternity Code and Time Paradox. And I also really like when Artemis and Holly are just hanging out as friends, or any time that Artemis is having like a nice time with someone, just because the boy deserves to have friends. But as a writer, I love the scene in Time Paradox where 10-year-old Artemis comes to the future, because both the reader and the possessed Angeline don't know that it's young Artemis until the reveal, because of the way it's written. It's just a genius use of the written medium, and I've thought so much about the scene and how it could be like adapted to another medium, and I can't figure out a satisfactory way yet because it's so tied into the written word. It's amazing. My least favorite scenes are any extended scenes away from Artemis. I'm such an Artemis stan. Like it's stupid. It was really hard for me to get through the demon B-plot in Lost Colony, like I've discussed before. And all the scenes in The Last Guardian that were about, like, the ghosts of the dead warriors possessing things. Like, it was just, yeah. There's a lot of lost potential in the last books that make me kind of sad when I read them. So you'll notice that I chose the typical earth tones for Holly's steampunk leprechaun costume, but I chose more flamboyant kind of showman colors for Artemis. I did this on purpose. First I thought that there was way too many earth tones in the picture as a whole, and I also wanted Artemis to stand out as the main character and as a foil for Holly. So his colors are kind of clashing with her colors. The next question is from Excerpx. Is that supposed to be like a play on excerpts? That's kind of clever. They say, just discovered your blog and it's amazing. Thank you. Congrats on 1,000 followers. It's really well deserved. Thank you. Questions. Which Artemis Fowl character do you think is the most underrated? I always wish that Doodah had been implemented more as a character. He could have been a really interesting addition to the team, but after the series ended, because he was introduced in Lost Colony, but then he's barely ever brought back, at least not to my knowledge. Like, not that I can remember. So he didn't really leave that much of an impression. And then number 1 is another underused one, too. Mostly because the series changes so much after his introduction. Like, they bring in the use of dark magic, and magic suppressants like the animal fat, and other lore that just isn't explored very much, and I feel like it's really tied into his character, because he's, like, so magical and stuff. But maybe these characters will come back in the new series about Miles and Beckett. Like, that would be kind of a good tie to the old series, like, to develop these characters that didn't get a lot of development. Speaking of, Asana Bridges asks, what do you think of the new series surrounding Miles and Beckett? I'm really excited to see what Owen Colfer brings in from the old series and how he makes this series its own thing. I really hope that he has a plan for the series and isn't just doing it because the movie will be coming out around that time. But I'm excited to learn more about the twins, especially since Colfer was so good at developing Artemis as a character, and also Holly and Butler and stuff. He's good with characters. I'm guessing that Beckett will be the wild card, like the impulsive character, and then Miles will be his foil. And I'm really interested to see how Miles will be distinguished from Artemis. But I kind of want Artemis to be left out. Like, I like how his series ended, and in my experience, creators writing epilogues to their popular characters doesn't really end well. Thinking in particular about Legend of Korra and Star Wars, and almost every Disney movie in the 2000s. So, yeah. I'll buy the books. I'm interested in reading them. super excited. Excerpts X also asked, if you could have any object or gadget from the books, what would it be? This one took me a while to think of, and then when I thought of it, I was like, duh. I would want the iris cam. I work with babies at a daycare, and there are so many times I wish I could record them doing something hilarious, but I know that as soon as I take out my phone to record them, they will stop whatever they're doing and focus on the phone. So I really wish I just had cameras in my eyes so I could just watch them doing something ridiculous and record it that way instead. So that's what I would want. Okay. Ayara012 asks the big question. I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on movie predictions, etc., because some of the stuff I've seen makes me concerned that they're pulling a Percy Jackson on us. Sad face. Oh, that is a sad face. Exerbex also had a similar question, and it's a big point of fear in the fandom right now for good reason. Like most people, I don't like the changes made to the casting. I don't like that Butler is black now because the filmmakers think that black is more of a minority than Eurasian, and didn't think through the concerning slavery undertones of casting Butler as a black person. I'm confused as to why Root was made a woman, especially since if they were to address sexism in this political climate, that would actually be a boon to the movie. It would not hurt it. It would only get it more critical praise. But my biggest objection to the casting, like most people, is the casting of Holly. Holly is canonically brown-skinned, so it doesn't make sense to me that they'd whitewash her, but make Butler black instead. Like, why not just cast a black lady to be Holly? Also, her being younger screws everything up. A young girl will age faster, or appear to age faster, than a 20-something-year-old does. So the whole extended lifespan for fairies thing is, like, wrecked. Then there's the concerning question of whether she'll still be an LEP captain, which is the whole reason she can be ransomed in the books. And then there's the fear that there will be, like, a Holly-Artemis romance in the film. Now, I am a hopeless shipper. I ship Ariel with Jim Hawkins from Treasure Planet. I ship Clara Oswald with the 12th Doctor in Doctor Who. I love the 11th Doctor and River Song together. I like fanfiction that explores the romance between Artemis when he's older with Holly, but that's headcanon. Artemis Fowl as a series is super important because it doesn't focus on romance or sexuality, but on the importance of friendship and selflessness. Plus, if this movie has a girl falling for a boy who kidnapped her, like, within the span of the same 2-hour movie, it's just kind of messed up. Though I rant, I'll probably go see the movie. Like, I do understand why they made some of the changes that they did, even if those changes are still stupid. But I do like the casting of Mulch and Foley and Opal and Artemis. Like, those all look fine. Can't say anything about their acting, though Josh Gad is really good. And his Twitter enthusiasm for the film is great. But also, like, the less the movie is like the series, the better chance that there will be a better adaptation someday. So, that's something to look forward to. I Am a Cute Tiger, asks, who is your favorite character to draw? And your least favorite? And who do you wish you could draw more? My favorite character to draw is a tie between Artemis and Holly, now that I'm finally happy with my designs for them. Historically, though, Holly has been my favorite. She's the most visually interesting. My least favorite is probably Mulch, because I don't enjoy drawing, like, dirty things, which is silly. And he's also very blocky. It's hard to, like, get a feel for his shape for me, really I just need to draw him more so that I get used to it, and then maybe I would like drawing him more. But I also don't really enjoy his character a whole lot. Like, I like his humor most of the time when he talks, but I don't like fart jokes. So, yeah. But his character design is still like a great creative take on dwarves. So, yeah, just take my opinion with a grain of salt, you know. As for who I wish I could draw more, I wish I could draw Trouble more. He's another one of those characters that didn't get a whole lot of development. But he has a great, like, face. Like, his description in the books is that he has, like, lightning-shaped eyebrows, which is amazing. So I need to still, like, nail down a design for him. But I like drawing his eyebrows. Isana Bridges asks, if you could be any fairy, what type? I want to say sprite, because they can fly, and they look most like the popular image of what a fairy is. But if I were to tweak the question a little bit, and it would be like, what fairy would I most likely be if I were in this universe? Like, they didn't really talk too much about gnomes, but I feel like I would be a gnome. Like, I'm not, again, I don't like fart jokes, so I wouldn't want to be a dwarf. Maybe a centaur. I could be a centaur. I'm not really, like, socially aware, and I'm not, like, super smart, but I don't think that's a part of the centaur, like, gene. I think I'd probably be a centaur. Sorry if this was a weird answer. Similar question from Claire TP3. If you were to compare yourself with any of the characters, which would suit your personality the best? I want to say Artemis. And I feel like I have to explain why, because I don't want to come across as, like, edgy or something. I relate a lot with Artemis' struggles. I mentioned this earlier. Like, I relate to how he has problems making friends, his hatred of physical exercise, and his struggle with, like, crippling guilt. I get the sense that he spends a lot of time with his thoughts, which is something I do as well. We both have the same sense of humor too, and we tend to intimidate people at first. Like, I am not visually intimidating, I feel, the way Artemis is, but I've been told by people that just the way that my face is when I'm thinking makes them think that I am, like, angry with them. And the most important people to me and to Artemis are our respective families and the friends that we have come to regard as family. And I also don't really relate that well with any other character. Like, I could be like, oh man, I would totally want to be friends with these characters, but we aren't very alike. Like, I'm not passionate and awesome and ambitious like Holly is. I'm not dedicated and stoic like Butler. I don't like wrestling like Juliet. And I'm not a paranoid, beleaguered shut-in like Foley. So I feel like Artemis is the one that I relate to most. But I would totally be friends with any of the other characters. Claire TP3 also suggests that I list what I think the worst qualities of the main characters are. Super interesting suggestion. Start with Holly. I think her worst quality is her self-righteousness, but that isn't just Holly's problem. All the fairies kind of suffer from this one. In every book, they talk about how, like, humans are destroying the environment, they kill each other, they're stupid, they don't understand anything. And yet the people who are ancient, who have been around way longer than humans, who are technologically advanced, still have rampant police brutality and sexism. Like, that doesn't make any of Holly's criticisms of humans invalid. Like, we do have a problem with violence and not taking care of our environment, and these are things that need to be fixed. But when a fairy brings these things up, it's usually not to criticize and make things better for humans, but as an excuse to hate them or to have prejudice against them. And so, yeah, I'm not really a fan, and I think it's her worst quality. Foley's worst quality is that he's a bit too high on his own fumes. He thinks he's amazing and can't be outthought, and that is always his downfall. Hubris is his fatal flaw. Every time he thinks that he's the best and no one can outthink his system or hack his system, it does. It falls apart. So that's his worst quality. Mulch's worst quality to me is his vulgarity and lack of hygiene. Like, logically it would be, oh, he's like kind of a flake, but that's kind of charming to me for his character. Like, he's the devilish rogue, but I just don't find fart jokes and stuff funny, like I mentioned before. Butler is a pure king. Like, the man can do no wrong. He's adorable. He is like affectionate and protective. He's amazing. But if I had to pick a worst quality, I guess it would be that he has a very narrow worldview, in that Artemis and Juliet are his world, and if one of them like dies, for example, he falls apart. So Butler, he needs a life. Like, I know that the butler occupation doesn't really allow for that, but he needs a vacation. So Artemis's worst quality is what makes him a great character. Like, it drives his character forward, and that is his guilt and his inability to forgive himself. Like, he feels like he needs to redeem himself by earning people's forgiveness when everyone's already forgiven him. He just hasn't forgiven himself. And it's this inability to forgive himself that gets him the Atlantis complex, and it ultimately kills him. Great suggestion, Claire. Thanks. Ellen the Melon asks, I'm curious to know your fave ships for the Artemis Fowl fandom. Do you have any headcanons for or about them? When I first read the series, I was a teenager with very few friends. I didn't know that friends could be like super affectionate or selfless to each other. That just wasn't my experience with friendships. And so when I saw that between Artemis and Holly in the series, I thought it must be romantic. But now, like, I kind of flip-flop back and forth since I've learned more about, like, relationships and stuff. I think platonic relationships are extremely important to portray, especially in children's literature, but I also can't see Artemis getting together with anyone else. Like, if he has to get married or be with someone, he wouldn't be able, if they weren't a fairy, he would not be able to tell them about fairies. And, I mean, Artemis being Artemis, I'm sure he could find a way around that. But for a time, he would have to lie to them, and then I'm not sure if the people would allow him to tell his spouse or significant other or whatever. So it just seemed easy, like the easy choice for him and Holly to get together eventually. And it also opens up a lot of interesting story opportunities, I think. Like, they would have to get over the limited lifespan that he has. And I feel like that was Colfer kind of dropped a hint to that in the Atlantis complex with Turnbull Root's wife. So I think that would be a really interesting story. As far as... So I guess that's kind of a headcanon. Yeah, but I really can't see either Artemis or Holly, like, settling down, having a couple kids. You know, I just always see them having adventures together. But I also feel like they're, like, inextricable parts of each other's lives. So, if I were to write a romance for them, I would have it start like the romance part would start a few years after he was resurrected, and that's actually what I would like to know the most about, is after the resurrection, Artemis, like, regaining his memories, but also kind of having, like, this dysphoria about this not being his body, because his body's dead, obviously, and really not having a place, and maybe finding that place is, like, the place he belongs is underground, or, you know, with a certain person or something. I don't know. But yeah, as far as other pairings in the Artemis Fowl universe, I don't have any. Again, the reason why I loved the Artemis Fowl books initially was because they didn't rely on romance. And they have amazing character development and character interactions. So I almost don't see a need to ship anything, which is weird for me, because usually I'd have, like, a crossover ship or something. But yeah, so Artemis and Holly is the only one that I've ever shipped. And even that for me is kind of a touch and go thing. If someone doesn't ship them, I totally understand why. If someone does ship them, I really hope that they're shipping them after Artemis is legal. But yeah. Thanks for the question. Okay, and then Alteris Potato. I had to look up what Alteris means. It means, like, between, like, platonic and romantic attraction. So, there you go. But they suggest that I talk about how I decided on my character designs for the Artemis Fowl cast. I love talking about this stuff, but it's also kind of hard to talk about, so I hope that this makes sense. So, to start off, shape is really important in all design, but in character design especially. For example, at first I wanted to use a lot of angles in Artemis's design because he's an inventor, he's industrial and rigid and cold. This would be juxtaposed against Holly's more organic, fluid shapes. Holly is an elf, she's more attuned with nature, and she's graceful. But with the angular Artemis, he looked a lot like one of Batman's wards instead of his own unique criminal mastermind. So I set out to make him more memorable by giving him the hair curly Q, the thick eyebrows, the dark eyelashes. I ended up going with this more eerie, fae-like design because Artemis isn't like other boys. By the end of the series, he's more part of the fairy world than the human one. So with Holly, I tried to stick with the book description as much as possible. I already talked about, like, the fluid lines that I used. The only places I deviated from the book on purpose was her body type and hairstyle. Though I would give Holly the crew cut in the book if I were illustrating the book, I don't think it matches her flyboy rebellious nature. So I went with the kind of pompadour, I don't know if that's how you say it, kind of hairstyle with the undercut. So you kind of get the military buzz cut style on the sides, but then like the more feminine, rebellious long hair on top. I also gave Holly a more curvaceous figure to go with the organic fluid shapes motif, but also because I think curvier bodies look stronger. Like, if I gave her a thin, kind of willowy body, I feel like she would, looking at her, I would be like, oh, she's just gonna break. And, like, if Holly is, like, working out and building up muscle, I don't think, like, a police officer, she wouldn't look that skinny, I don't think. I mean, maybe it's an elf thing, but I like the curvier one better. The LEP uniforms I designed not to look like human uniforms. The recon uniforms have no padding on them, except for like in the shoulders because I thought it looked cool. Because they won't be involved in direct combat, so I made them skin tight and kind of easy to move in, so they could hide and move fast. The uniforms are in earth tones with highlights of gold, and again have lots of organic shapes. I tried to make them simple yet functional, so there's not a lot of bangles and doodads and buttons and stuff. I tried to carry the idea that fairy fashion wouldn't be influenced by human fashion over to Foley's design, so he doesn't have like the traditional looking white lab coat. He's got a coat with like a high neckline collar kind of thing, and these weird cuffed sleeves, and it kind of like buttons more like a pea coat than a normal coat. And I gave Foley half moon glasses because again, it's a more organic shape. Foley's face is long and he has a wide nose and front teeth to emulate a horse's. Though he has horns too, and with the goatee there's definitely like some satyr influence in there. I always clothe his horse half as well, because it's weird to me that like a civilized race of centaurs wouldn't cover their genitals. Like, that would just be weird if they were running around half naked. Speaking of uncivilized, mulch, one of the big recurring challenges of designing these characters is not making them look like stereotypes. So most dwarves are depicted as short and hairy, and are usually like lots of earth tones, so I had to figure out how to distinguish him from other designs. The breakthrough was giving mulch it's vitiligo. It's like the skin condition or birth condition where there's light patches of skin all over the body. I also gave him a hipster beanie and put him in prison jumpsuit orange under his blue overalls, so this kind of made him instantly recognizable. Other than that, I followed the book's description. Big teeth, lots of hair, strong arms for digging, wide nose for smelling, and tiny mole-like eyes. For Butler's design, I went all angles. He's rigid, sturdy, rock hard. I made the decision to rarely show his eyes, which made him more closed off and thus intimidating. He has harsh, sharp eyebrows and a square nose. And he's Eurasian, so I kind of leaned more into like the Asian part of Eurasian, which also made it easier to kind of have like the closed eyes and that's why his nostrils are also shaped the way they are. It's more of an Asian shape. When I draw him, I think of him as like a rough stone statue. Sometimes I give him like a blue diamond earring just for that extra bit of individuality, though I know like in the Eternity Code he gets on to that other bodyguard for having earrings and stuff. But I feel like Artemis would kind of rub off on Butler in that like he would be okay with breaking some of his own rules. I don't know. He has a tattoo, so, but you can't see the tattoo that often. I don't know. Juliet is also close to her book counterpart. I think the only intentional change I made was to droop her eyes a bit on like the outsides. It's kind of like an anime trick. It gives them more of like a laid back, chill appearance. Other than that, I'm careful to draw her both muscular and extremely feminine in like her makeup and the way she dresses. Like, in her way she dresses, she's not that feminine, I guess. I draw her in a lot of tank tops and stuff like that, but she has her nails done, she wears makeup. Like, not because she feels she has to look good for other people, but because she likes looking good. She does it for herself. And I just love that about her character. Minerva, even though I don't draw Minerva a whole lot, I made her like the stereotypical pretty girl, which sets her apart in this group of characters because none of the other ones are that stereotypical pretty girl. Like, Holly's got the kind of other color scheme of having the red hair with the dark skin, and she's got the hooked nose and the pointy ears and stuff. And then Juliet is kind of punk. So, and then Artemis is kind of like an effeminate man. So having just like a stereotypical pretty girl is unique in her own way in this group of characters. So I gave her like a small little like Disney princess nose. She has round cheeks, perfect curly hair, but she does this on purpose. Like, she's not like Artemis. She doesn't want to look intimidating. She wants to have a popular public image to further her career. I might change her design later on, but right now I'm fine with it as it is. And finally, Opal. I based Opal on how I remember my sister from when we were younger. Tiny, dark-haired, and vindictive. I added a bit more red into her design. I know in the books that she had like black hair, but I think I gave her... I'm not looking at pictures right now, but I gave her more red in her hair. And her magic is red, and her eyes are kind of red. None of the other characters have red in their designs. I don't count Holly's orange hair as being red. So so red is like a passionate, evil color, but it also sets her apart from the other characters, and so that's really cool. And then again, I kept with like the organic curvy shapes for her like body shape and her hair, even though I try to keep her body more childlike because of what happens in Opal Deception. I wanted to make it believable that she could pass as a human child. But her hair is like this floating, almost like ethereal kind of thing. Oh, I'm sorry. So even though she has like a childlike physique, she always has long, like clawed fingernails and wears boots. So those are I think all the designs that I have like set designs for, though I might redesign Minerva. I am still like toying with my number one design. I feel like it could be stronger. I guess I do I like my Angeline and Artemis Senior designs. I think they're pretty just book accurate. Like, I liked giving Angeline kind of like the gaunt, Maleficent kind of cheekbones because she was so sickly in the first book, and then in not Atlantis Complex, Time Paradox. But yeah, I like that Artemis Senior just kind of looks like Artemis, but maybe more angular than Artemis. Artemis Senior and Angeline both are a lot more angular than Artemis the Second is. But I still need to work on the designs for Root and Trouble, and I've not drawn Lily Frond. I mean, she was such a small character, so I don't know. I've not drawn Doodah, except for maybe one time. So there's a lot of characters, and probably some that I'm forgetting that I haven't even, like, tried to draw yet. So if you guys send asks about those characters, I'd have to figure out a design for them. So yeah, thanks for suggesting that. I really like talking about how I design things. Okay, you guys, so we've come to the end of this video and this whole project that took way longer than it should have. The last finishing touches I have on this is the filters, which I don't always use. I try not to use them because I feel like they can be kind of a crutch, but they do help with the unity of the piece and they help make it feel more vintage, so that's why I use them on this one. And they do help. Like, I probably should use them more just so I understand them. Anyway, thank you all for your questions and for your support of the blog. And if you want me to do more stuff like this, like kind of discussion of different topics, tell me what topics you want me to discuss in the comments, and I will see if I have the time while I'm in India to do those. I might just put like the audio commentary over art I'm doing while I'm here. So thanks again